I'm going to show you how to make a player-specific admin panel, and by player-specific, I simply mean that not everyone can access it and only one person can, or as many as you like, but we'll configure that later on. So we're going to have three features in this admin panel. We're going to be able to kick a specific player, we're going to be able to freeze and unfreeze a specific player, and we're also going to be able to shut down the server. So if this looks a little bit complicated, I promise you it's not. I was going to film myself making this, but it took so long and I just, I got distracted on the way and it was, there was a lot of other hiccups. But all you actually need is a kick text box, a freeze text box, a shutdown server button, a freeze button, and a kick button. That's all you're going to need for this. All the other stuff is just simply decoration. So let's get started. First of all, I think we're going to start from top to bottom. So we're going to go with the kick button first. So we're going to open up our kick button and we're going to click on the little white plus and we're going to simply add a local script. I'm going to just rename this kick local and then we're going to go into our script. So delete the default text. So first of all, we need to get our button. So we're going to say local button equals script.parent. After that, we need to actually make a kick event. We need a remote event to communicate from the client to the server that we want to actually kick someone, because we can't kick someone on the client because it just won't register, it won't work, and other people will see them but we won't, and it will cause a lot of problems. So what we're going to do is we're going to scroll up and we're going to our replicated storage, and what you're going to do is you're going to search for a remote event, add that, and then I'm just going to rename this kick event. So now back in our local script, we're going to say local kick event equals game colon get service replicated storage colon wait for child kick event. So what we're doing is we're basically fetching our remote event from replicated storage, and wait for child simply means we're going to wait for this to load before we continue with the script. Next, we actually need to get our player text box. So that is the text box over here that we want to actually, this is the player. So we need this text box. We need to know what is the value inside here. So when I'm typing my name, for example, we need to know that this is the name that we're typing. So we're going to go back into our local script and we're just going to say local player TB, which is local player text box equals script.parent.parent.kick text box. Then we actually need to get our player. So we're going to say local player equals game.players.local player. Okay, so now we've got all our variables set up. So we actually need to detect when we press the button. So we're going to say button.mouse button one click, which also works for other devices, connect function. And now we need to make a for loop. I've done this in my past tutorials before. I'm not very good at explaining it, but essentially what we're going to do is we're going to loop through our player list, and if we're going to check our player text box and our text inside it, if it matches with any player that's in the server, then we're going to proceed with the request. So we're going to say for I, which is our iteration, player in game colon get service players colon get players do. So all that means is we're going to iterate over I. So you can really name this whatever you want. You can have this as an underscore, you can have it as a Z, you can literally have it whatever you want. I tend to just use I because it reminds me it's an iteration. And we're going to get the player object in game get service players get players. This is going to return a table of players. And then we're going to loop over this several times. So we're going to say if player textbox.text is equal to player.name, then, so we're saying if the text inside our player text box is equal to a player that we found in this list, then we're going to fire our kick event. So we're going to say kick event colon fire server, and then we're going to pass through the player that we want to kick. Now that's all we need to do for this one. What we're now going to do is we're going to head on up to our server script service. We're going to do this one at a time. So we're going to add a new script, make sure it's a script, and we're going to call this admin GUI handler. You can call it whatever you want, it doesn't matter. Now we're going to go into here, and first of all, we need to actually get our event, and we're going to be adding them as we go along. So we're going to say local replicated storage equals game colon get service replicated storage. Then we're going to get our kick event. We're going to say local kick event equals replicated storage wait for child kick event. And now what we're going to do is we're going to set up different stages because we're going to be having all of our admin scripts in this one script. You can put them in other ones if you want, but I just think it's a bit easier, so we're going to do it like this. So I'm just going to make a little comment. So a comment is simply something that's not part of the code, and we can just write whatever we want and it's not going to matter. So I'm going to call this one kick handling. So we know that underneath here we're going to be handling our kicks. So we're going to say kick event dot on server event, so we're detecting once the server has been fired, connect function, and then in these little brackets we want to pass through two parameters. So the way a remote event works is that once you fire from a local script, you're actually passing through your player. So we're passing through us. So for me, RGB, I'm passing through RGB, and then I've also added this other player, which is the player that we're trying to target. So that could be, I don't know, David, for example. So we've got me, RGB, and we're also passing through David, but we don't need to add our name beforehand because the remote event already does that for us. So when we're in here, we need two parameters. So we're going to say player who sent request, which is us, and then we're going to say player to kick. So all we're doing here is we're saying this is our player, so this is us, we sent the request, and then this is the player we want to kick. This is that player that we fired earlier. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. So now we're simply going to ask if, are we actually able to do that? So we're going to say if player who sent request dot name is equal to, and I'm going to put my name, but you put your name or whoever you want, then, so all we're checking here is the person who sent this request actually an admin? So we're gonna, you can put that to whoever you want, and if you want to add other people, you can also say or player who sent request dot name is equal to, and then like someone else, and you can do that as many times as you want. It doesn't matter, you can just keep going as much as you want, but I'm only going to do it with my name because I'm the only one who's going to be doing this. Is just for testing. So now it's super easy. We've done all of our checks. We know we're an admin. We've sent it to the server. All we're going to do now is we're going to say player to kick : kick, and that on its own will kick the player. But if you really want to, you can add a nice little message for them. I'm going to put you have been kicked by an admin. Okay, now let's give it a little test and let's see if it works. So once I type in my name over here, you can see that in our output, server kick message, you've been kicked by an admin. Now if we weren't actually in studio and this was a published game, it would pop up right here. But I actually can't move around. You can hear me pressing my buttons and stuff. And if we actually look on the server side of it, I'm not even there because I've been kicked. Okay, so let's move on to our next one. We've done our kick event. So our kick player function works. Now we need our freeze player event. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to our freeze button. Same thing we did before. We're going to add a local script and we're just going to call it freeze local. And we're going to get rid of our default text. So what we can actually do here, because the code is so similar from the last one, actually go back to your kick local script and you're just going to highlight everything and you're going to copy it. Then we're going to go to our freeze local and we're going to paste it. Now what we're going to need to do is obviously change a few things, but because the code structure is so similar, I didn't want to spend the time simply going through it over and over again when you can just easily just copy and paste it. So first of all, we need to actually get our different event because we don't want to be calling the kick event, we want to be calling a freeze event. So we're going to go back up to our replicate storage and we're going to add a new remote event. And we're going to call this freeze event. So then we're going to go back into our freeze local and we're going to say freeze event equals game, get service replicated storage, wait for child, and make sure you change it to freeze event. And then we also need to change our player text box and we're going to say freeze text box. This is provided that you've named your things differently. If you haven't, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure you have a way which you can distinguish which one's which in your code. And really, all we have to do here is just change kick event to freeze event. And it will fire the exact same thing, and we just need to fire through the player because all we're doing is we're checking for the text box text. If it matches the player, then we're going to freeze the player and send it to the server. So let's head on up into our admin GUI handler. Now we're going to work on our second part, which is the freeze handling. So we've done our kick handling, we don't need to worry about that anymore, we just need to use this. So freeze handling is a lot more different because the way a character's structure works is they have a humanoid root part. Now the humanoid root part pretty much controls everything to do with their character. So for example, where they are, so when you're trying to teleport someone, you'll change the position of the humanoid root part. And if you're trying to freeze someone, you will anchor the humanoid root part, which is exactly what we're going to do here. So first of all, we actually need to get our freeze event. So we're going to say local freeze event equals replicated storage, wait for child, freeze event. Then we'll head on down underneath our freeze handling comment, and we're going to say freeze event dot on server event connect function. And then in here, we're going to pass the exact same things we did last time. We're going to say player who sent request. And then instead of player to kick, we're going to call it player to freeze. And then we're going to say if player who sent request dot name is equal to, my name is RGB, but you can change it to yours. So we're going to do this on every single one because we want to make sure that the person who sent this request is actually us. We don't want it to be some random person because we don't obviously want everybody being able to do this. Unless you do want that in your game, then feel free to just remove that line. You don't need it. But other than that, if you just want to be safe, I suggest doing this. So now we actually need to get the player who we want to freeze his character. Because like I said, there's a character and there's a humanoid root part. So we get the player's character from the player object and then the humanoid root part from the player's character. So we're going to say local character equals player to freeze dot character. Then we're going to say local humanoid root part equals character wait for child humanoid root part. So what all that's going to do is once the player is in, we're going to simply get their character and we're just going to get their humanoid root part. So now we can actually freeze our character. We've got everything we need. So we're just going to say if humanoid root part dot anchored is equal to false, then. So what we're actually doing is we're going to make this toggle because you don't just want to be able to freeze someone and never unfreeze them. You could just have another button that says unfreeze underneath it, but I like to do it simply and just it makes a lot more sense just to make it in the same button. So what we're going to do is just detect if it's already anchored, which means if it's already stuck in place, and if not, then we're going to freeze them. But if it is stuck in place, then we're going to do the opposite and we're going to unfreeze them. So we're going to say humanoid root part dot anchored equals true. Then we're going to go down a line, we're going to say else, and we're going to say humanoid root part dot anchored equals false. And all that's going to do is check, okay, are you frozen? If not, then yeah, we're going to freeze you. But if you aren't frozen, if you already are frozen, then we're going to unfreeze you. So now if we go into our game and give it a test, so you can see I can already walk around and I've got my name in here now. Once I press freeze and I try walk around, I can't do anything. But then if I press it again, I can walk around and I can do everything like normal. So now the last one we have to do is the shutdown server button. Now this one's really easy. We're going to be using another for loop, but I'll try and explain this the best I can. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to our shutdown server button and we're going to add another local script. We'll just call this shutdown local, and then inside your script delete the default code, and we're going to need our button again. This is also going to be very similar to the other one, so if you want to save time you can just copy and paste it. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy and paste it back in. But all we actually need from this, we don't need a text box, you can get rid of that. We do need the player, we will be making an event. So actually let's do that now. What we can also do is just quickly delete all that inside. What we're going to do is go up to replicated storage and we're going to make our last remote event. And we're going to call this shutdown event. And we're going to say in our shutdown local, shutdown event equals game get service replicated storage, wait for child, shutdown event. Now, this is a super simple one. This is probably the easiest one we're going to do. We're going to say shutdown event, fire server. We don't need to pass anything through because we're already passing through our player just without even putting anything in. So the server will be able to handle that for us. Now we're going to head back up to our admin GUI handler and we're going to make our very last thing. So we're going to say this is our shutdown handling section. You don't have to add these comments, by the way. I'm just adding them because it makes it easier for people to read. So we're going to now start with our code. So what we first need to get is our shutdown event. So we're going to say local shutdown event equals replicated storage, wait for child, shutdown event. Then we're going to come back down to our shutdown handling comment and we're going to say shutdown event on server event, connect, function, and then in these little brackets again, we know that a player object has already been passed through because remember, once we fire from a local script, no matter what we put in here, the first argument will always be our player. So we're just going to put player who sent request. And then we're now going to check, is it us again? Yeah, we're back. If player who sent request dot name is equal to RGB or your name, then for I player in game colon get service players colon get players do. So it's kind of similar like last time. All we're doing is we're just checking, are we this person? Are we an admin? And if so, we're going to say for I player. So that means for every player in game get service get players, we are going to just simply kick them. And then we're going to say this server has been shut down by an admin. So you might be wondering why we're just kicking them, because there is actually no real function in Roblox to just shut down the server. But a good way to shut down a server is to kick everyone in it, because once a server goes empty, it shuts down. And there we go. Now we're all done with that, we can just go back and give it one final test, and we're going to just test everything at once. Okay, so what we're going to do is first of all test that our freeze works. Yep, that's my spacebar. I'm jumping, can't hear anything. Unfreeze works. We've already tested our kick, so I'm not going to do that. And our shutdown server button. There we go. So we can't do anything. We've practically been kicked. Server kick message. This server has been shut down by an admin, and it will kick every single person in your game. So I hope this tutorial helped you. If it did, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. If you have any questions or concerns, or your code isn't working, need any help, please leave a comment. I'm happy to help. And I'll see you all later.